Hi. Have you ever wondered how some Texas towns got their names? You might think it's really simple, right? London, Paris, Rome, Texas. Well, for one small Texas town, the story or etymology of its name is not quite so simple. The story is Folk Etymology on the Frontier, and my name is Rochelle Gregory. And I love this story because it shows how linguistics, or the study of language, and history often intersect in interesting and surprising ways. So, I want you to imagine, it's 1854. Alex Dobkins and his nearby neighbors, the Holland family, have decided to build a cabin in the west central Texas plains. They've used local mesquite trees and oak trees to build a cabin to provide shelter. But the conditions are really difficult. There's nearby Comanche and Kiowas. There's extreme isolation and loneliness. And only after a year does Alex Dobkins and the Holland family decide to gather up all of their belongings, put him back into their covered wagon, and go east toward a fortified settlement called Fort Gates. But the cabin didn't stay vacant for long. It provided a wonderful shelter for nearby settlers and pioneers coming through the area. A lookout might go out and spot a warring raiding party, or they would spot terrible weather, hailstorms, thunderstorms, lightning, and they would call out, double in, and that was a signal for everybody to come back to the cabin to take shelter. And the cabin was used in this way for almost a decade. 10 years later, Dobkins decides he wants to return back to his cabin. It's 1865 now, and the Civil War has ended. But he realizes the cabin hasn't been vacant during that time. But that's no bother. He continues to use the cabin, and in 8 years, by 1873, he's decided that he would turn it into a motel for stagecoaches traveling the dusty trails between Fort Worth, Texas, and Yuma, Arizona. Travelers would come in and they would need a warm bed and a hot meal, and he was going to provide that. And so to do so, he sawed his cabin in half and created a breezeway, and he built guest rooms on both sides. And the motel became known as the Double Inn. And it was very successful up until about 1882, when the motel was no longer needed because the Kansas-Missouri Railroad line had started to come through. Still, the name stuck after all of those years, and the town was known as Dublin, Texas. Now, you might think it's simple, right? There's an Irish city capital that the travelers and settlers would be aware of, but it's not quite that easy. What we see here is a great example of folk etymology and linguistic reanalysis. Yes, the settlers knew the Irish city capital, but with their southern drawl and in the Texas heat, the words would soften over time, and double in it became its natural phonology or sound of Dublin. And so now you know a little bit of the history and the linguistic history of Dublin, Texas. And I share this because we often think of history and linguistics as abstract concepts, but really it shows how language is never fixed and it changes over time based on the people and that use those words and that language. Thank you for listening to my story, and I look forward to hearing yours later in the semester.